Hello, everybody, and welcome to 2W Tech's Modern Shop Floor webinar series. I'm Super Z, your host, and we are thrilled to be kicking off session one today, Building the Foundation with IT Infrastructure. Today, we're going to dive into how reliable, flexible, and secure IT infrastructure can transform your manufacturing operations. Today's presenters are Mark Jameson, who is our President and CEO, Tom Guerin, who is our CTO, and Sam Plummer, who runs our Epicor practice. Each of these gentlemen have over 20 plus years experience with manufacturing solutions. At 2W Tech, we're proud to be the 2024 Epicor Global Partner of the Year, and we're also a Microsoft Direct CSP with solution partner designations in security, data and AI, infrastructure, and modern work. Our expertise in M365, Azure, and Edge devices help manufacturers like you modernize efficiently. For a full line card, please visit our website at 2wtech.com.
Hey, thanks, Sue. So we're going to put together a 4-part series on the shop floor. This is the first one. As we were sitting around thinking about, what value could we bring to our clients to our webinar series, we kept coming back to the shop floor. And the shop floor tends to be the place that, from a technology perspective, that everybody ignores. It's where all the old PCs go. It's a very difficult environment in which to run technology. And so we thought we could bring some value by talking about the shop floor, some things we can do to modernize it, some things to work for. And like we do in all our webinars, what we're going to do is we're going to give you a series of quick things that you can do, some wins that you can walk out of this webinar. So infrastructure. We're going to start with infrastructure. Tom, why are we starting with infrastructure?
Oh, good question, right? So, we've got a 4-part series. We get to take a little bit of time to dive in, but, infrastructure is a great place to start because it's the foundation. And in what we find with our client base, or especially when we come into new clients, is that especially on the shop floor, the infrastructure tends to have been, I don't want to say ignored, but maybe wasn't in front of everyone's spending list. And, dealing with the infrastructure, though, lets us, first of all, reduce costs. You've got significant impacts to infrastructure issues out on the shop floor, and we'll talk a little bit about that. We can improve efficiency, real-time data access. We'll talk about that and how to get that out to the shop floor. And then, on everyone's mind these days, security and regulatory compliance. So the shop floor, again, is an area where we see a lot of people kind of skirting around compliance best practices. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So let's.
Yeah, so we were looking at, we've boiled this down to 3 basic things, right? We want the infrastructure to be reliable. We need to be flexible because what we're seeing now is, the shop floor is much more dynamic. We are starting to see our clients getting away from paper job travelers, for example, right? And as we start to become more dynamic and we start to become more flexible, we also need to always worry about security. So like everything else, but security is a unique beast in the shop floor world because you do have people moving around. You have multi-factor tends to be very challenging. You may have some language barriers. There's a whole nother piece of this that we need to look at. So first off, let's look at Tom. Let's look at reliability in the infrastructure on the shop floor. So
yeah, sure.
Yeah.
The big thing here, look, reliability, having reliable infrastructure on the shop floor, downtime on the shop floor costs thousands of dollars an hour. It can be an incredibly expensive experience.
It's real money.
And yeah, that's just the reality of it. And it's a noisy environment. It's not a pretty clean office environment. There's, grease and dirt and metal shavings and lots of electrical noise and things like that. So, bringing reliability to the shop floor is a big deal. It's also a vulnerable environment. We walk into these shops and, especially second and third shift, people have got personal devices going. There's, while they're on their break, everyone's trying to figure out, how do I get on the Wi-Fi? Because of course their wireless data doesn't work very well. And again, these incredibly noisy environments. So it's a vulnerable environment, and you've also got a lot of maybe less technically trained, or, at least that aren't getting the same, kind of drilling into them about security and compliance that you might from office or financial personnel.
That's a really good point, Tom, because you have these workers on the shop floor who are magicians with a CNC machine or a lathe or a laser cutter, but don't necessarily real super proficient on PCs and infrastructure and how do I log in and how do I get on the Wi-Fi and that kind of thing.
Yeah, and that's, their shop floor tools are designed to be reliable, right? There's a CNC machine out there, or, big old lathe that's sitting there, and those things will just go and go and go and go, and they can really beat on them. Having the rest of your infrastructure, and, I know Sam's going to start to talk about some of the devices you might have out there, but having the rest of your infrastructure be that reliable, the routers, the switches, your Wi-Fi, the power, all of those things match that level of reliability for the shop floor is something that does take some investment and takes some thought and planning. But there's some real benefits.
Yeah. So let's talk about what are some stuff that the folks who are taking their lunch hour to watch us today, what can they do now to drive reliability onto the shop floor?
Yeah. There's some quick actions, right? So keep things patched. Either your team or work with MSP, work with a team like 2W. Make sure that your equipment's up to date. Make sure it's patched. Make sure it's under warranty and supported current firmware. Make sure that it's maintained. Some of these things require cooling. Some of these things require, just basic maintenance. Make sure that those are done. Those are low-cost things to do. A Wi-Fi survey. You'd be shocked the amount of lost time and effort that happens on the shop floor with people wandering around with a tablet or a handheld device that everybody knows it doesn't work back there, so you need to walk out 20 feet toward the middle. We see it all the time. A Wi-Fi survey or infrastructure survey is a low-cost way.
Yeah, and what's interesting is I think there's a misnomer that a Wi-Fi survey, infrastructure Wi-Fi survey, is going to be expensive, and it's really not. But it is doing Wi-Fi in a shop floor environment is exceedingly hard. You've got a lot of metal, you've got a lot of RF interference, and have a professional come out, do the analysis, and sometimes it's as simple as, well, if you move that access point to the left 6 feet, you will get far better coverage than where it sits today, all the way to, hey, you need to add another access point here, and it'll make all the difference. It is a skill set. You should hire professionals to do it. And if you want to be introduced to some professionals, we'll be more than happy to do so here. But that is a relatively low-cost way to ensure that you're getting good Wi-Fi coverage across your shop floor.
Yeah. And then the last quick action that we've got here is robust shop floor devices. There are devices that are designed to be used on the shop floor. There's sometimes a trade-off. Sometimes you can go with basically a disposable device because it's so low cost, paired with like a cloud PC or something. So put your actual compute, off the shop floor, or go with robust, tough book type. I don't know if those exist anymore, but those robust shop floor devices, handhelds that are designed for that, fanless PCs, things like that. There's a lot of options out there now. This is a known issue, and there's lots of great solutions.
Almost every time I go into the shop floor of one of our clients, the PCs are yellowed, they're old, they're the hand-me-downs from the front office, And it doesn't have to be that way. And it doesn't, you're subjecting this older technology to folks who just want to interface with that, with the MES screen, get in, get out, measure my scrap and move on to the next job. And so, and there's some really nice low cost ways to do it. I think our recommendation in a lot of this is buy the $75 tablet, and then when it breaks, go get another one, as opposed to, spending putting a very expensive piece of interface equipment on the shop floor.
Yeah, things like Cloud PC, it's really, Windows 365 is the offering. One of the offerings are Azure Virtual Desktop, letting you move the compute, the storage, all of that off the shop floor. And so basically all you've got is a dumb display device or input device. For a lot of instances is really actually a great way to do it. Replace those $75 or $100 devices every 6 months instead of buying a new $6,000 Toughbook, for instance. So
yeah, and that Cloud PC, the Windows 365 is showing a lot of promise, and I think it's going to show a lot of promise, a lot of flexibility on the shop floor. So speaking about mobile devices, let's move on to the next one: flexibility. Right. So Sam, I don't want to forget that you're here. So let's talk a little bit about just the operational aspect of why is this important? Why do we want to put mobile devices in the hands of our shop workers?
Well, a couple of reasons. The most compelling reasons come down to accuracy and timeliness of transactions, right? If you've ever worked with me or a member of our team in ERP implementations or ongoing support for your ERP, we probably talked about that, and that's critically important. Again, capturing that movement of material, whether it's a purchase order receipt or a piece of bar stock moving from the stock room to the saws, or a piece of cut material moving from the saw to the lathe, whatever that situation is, the closer to the point that transaction actually occurs, that we can capture and validate that data, the better. And again, high level timeliness and accuracy of transactions is paramount. A second, or really third benefit there beyond those, is access to information. Again, sometimes it may be very difficult to distinguish, for example, two parts, one from the other. And again, as we start thinking about devices, we need to think about these use cases. But for example, if we want to present a part image of, hey, here's the part number you're looking for, here's a picture of that part, or maybe multiple images of that part, so to assist that user in distinguishing those, especially in cases where we can't directly mark the part with a part number or barcode, that becomes relevant. So again, kind of zooming back out to thinking about the devices we choose, I very much encourage all of you to think in terms of use cases. Again, put yourself in the position of that individual, whether it's somebody at the receiving dock doing a receipt, whether it's somebody picking an order prior to shipment, whether it's a material handler staging materials for final assembly. Put yourself and really spend the time to look at that job and what its informational requirements are, both in terms of information delivered to the user and of the transactions that they are going to record as they do that PO receipt or issue material to jobs or pick parts and stage them for a sales order shipment. Again, in all those scenarios, flexibility is your friend. And again, when we start talking about devices, once we think about use cases, where we want to use them, we're going to have choices. A handheld Android-based cell phone format, an Android tablet, a Windows-based tablet are all possible options, including, by the way, in many of our customers, vehicle, especially like tow motor or forklift mounted hardware, where you need two hands to operate the machine, but you're still maybe transporting a 5,000-pound forging from the receiving dock to the milling department. And in all those cases, again, device selection is a wide open field, but the guidance that you need to start thinking about now is the use case. How will it be used, and what data is both presented to the user and what is the transaction that they were going to record? And by taking that approach early, you can mix and match the correct devices to the correct place. Because as I'll talk about in a few minutes, there's also quite a few choices available to you in terms of the software. And we'll talk a little bit about those later.
Yeah, so let's, Tom, you have, I don't want to leave you out of this. Tom, do you got anything you want to add to this?
Well, of course, I want to beat the security and compliance drum as well there. Having using mobile devices that are designed for the purpose and that we're able to secure, that we're able to manage using something like Intune or something along those lines. If they're lost or stolen, where does your data go? If they're, we need to be able to audit their location and their usage and who's using them and make sure that we're, again, dealing with security, multi-factor, things like that. Using the right devices, even low-cost ones, we've got good ways to do that. So just something to be thinking about, though, as that, as you're making those choices around devices.
Every motion around your infrastructure technology, regardless of what it is, needs to start and end with your security of your business, right?
Yeah.
So what can we do? Quick wins, right?
Yeah, quick wins. Pilot, get out there, get moving on something. That's a really important part here. So, get your infrastructure, get the wireless up to date, like we talked about, get that survey in place, then start a pilot of tablets and scanners, get started, start to see what works, start to see where the return is, where the quick dollars are in ROI. That's a big one. Mobile device integration and safety. Sam was talking about, you're moving a 5,000-pound casting across the floor, driving a 3,500-pound piece of equipment, and you're running a tablet. Well, let's talk about how to do this safely, but also from a security standpoint. So how do we, how's this going to be integrated? How should they be using them? Sam, you want to talk about those last two bullets there?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I'll kind of get into a little bit more detail on this, but from a use cases and categorization of those on the shop floor, they really fall into two broad categories. One being movement of material. That's, again, think of everything from PO receipt through inspection, put away, material issue, movement between various operations in WIP, and again, staging for shipment or a put away into a finished goods location, being the inventory or material movements. And then also the production detail. We're tracking the movement of individual pieces, or perhaps again, if you work more in larger quantities, you may be using PCID functionality to track the movement of a tote full of parts, for example, between the lathe or the Swiss machine and a deburring department, and from deburring maybe over to parts washing. In all those cases, again, look at the specifics of your business and the workflows, and that can inform your choices about not only the software, but the correct hardware to choose. Again, we're going to keep focusing on those use cases specific to your business to help give you advice about what you should select.
So it's never a 2W Tech webinar without us coming off the top rope on protecting your data and compliance. And this was a stat that I had not seen before, but just came out to just kind of hit me hard. Ransomware is 20% higher in manufacturing and than in other vertical industries. And I think it's because as much as we talk about it, as much as we hammer it, I still think there's a laggard mentality when it comes to security. And if we're going to roll out efficiencies into the shop floor, I think we need to take that into mind, right, Tom?
Yeah, that's, I mean, there is that laggard mentality. I think that's a fair way of saying it. And there's also we tend to invest in the things that produce the widgets that we sell. We don't necessarily invest in the infrastructure for the other systems. And so part of it lies there. Part of it is in training. As an industry, manufacturing has, or as a vertical, manufacturing has more people who are not in the office, not in that technical space necessarily, at least not the same kind of technical space. And again, the training tends to focus more around shop floor safety, and how to make the parts correctly or how to assemble the thing, and less about, how should I be using a computer that, really is just a tool for them to get their job done. So I think there's a training aspect as well as an investment. And then there's also a target, for better or for worse, manufacturing is a target for espionage, for foreign governments, for defense. If you're in the defense industrial base, and I'm seeing a lot of familiar names here that are at some level along the way. There's a reason why some of those industries are targeted. Just saw from CISA yesterday a new round of foreign nationals going after manufacturing.
Well, and it's fun. We were just talking before we were waiting for the webinar to start, and we were talking about the SpaceX launch, and then we started to list our clients who do business with SpaceX, and that list is growing and growing and growing, and it's manufacturers that you would never think are involved at that level of who need to protect their data, and then makes them and it does make them targets, and we do need to think about it. And I think part of the other problem is multi-factor authentication on the shop floor is exceedingly hard. They don't necessarily carry their phones with them. They may or may not be able to use a password. So you kind of got to lean into the biometric stuff, right, Tom?
Yeah, that's right. And I think when we talk about actions, we'll talk a little bit more about that. But there are options now for the shop floor that didn't exist or weren't very reliable even just a few years ago, with facial recognition, with fingerprint, with RFID, things like that.
Yeah, well, we'll go there now. So since you led into the slide,
yeah. So getting conditional access or multi-factor authentication out to the shop floor is an area. It's a quick action. It's actually, Mark said it's hard, and it is, but it's something that can be done. You can start moving there pretty quickly. You can start that process. Historically, it was much more difficult. You don't want guys on the shop floor, people on the shop floor carrying around their mobile phones and messing with their mobile phones necessarily, or they may not want to be. There's all kinds of regulations and requirements not to do that, or you may not want somebody with a portable camera walking around on the floor with it out. You could have some compliance issues there. But now, again, we've got options with Windows Hello for Business and RFID name badges or fingerprint, facial recognition, other options, tokens, keys, so that you can uniquely identify the shop floor person that's doing that data entry or pulling that data, looking up that drawing, whatever. Gone are the days where it's okay really to have shop 1, shop 2, and shop 3 logging into your systems. If you're seeing that in your business, you really want to look at that as a serious concern. Audits and vulnerability scans. Again, shop floor tends to be an area that has been neglected until recently. You want to start to extend those out to there. extend your testing, and that's everything from physical environment. Many of you are dealing with CMMC, ITAR, other things like that. You've got who can walk in the door, how are they authenticated, how are they badged, how do we react to someone who's on the floor who isn't properly badged or is unescorted and has a should be escorted badge. So there's some real training, employee training there. It's the last bullet. And then again, updating your firewalls and your other access controls. Devices on the shop floor don't necessarily need to see the rest of your enterprise. Let's set things up properly so that they have visibility to what they need visibility to and not to others. And then again, those access controls are on conditional access. Yeah,
I think Tom, that last bullet point, there's a lot of emphasis in training shop floor workers on physical safety, right? And there are programs in place. There's usually there's a whiteboard, X amount of days without an incident, but there's almost no cybersecurity training that happens for shop floor workers. We talk about everybody how to remain physically safe, but we never teach them on how to keep the business safe or how to keep our business data safe. And so I think that's a really quick win. It doesn't have to be a big onerous thing. There's a bunch of self-paced stuff that you can do to create cybersecurity awareness. I think that's a really nice low-hanging fruit, piece of low-hanging fruit for your shop floor. So yep. Sam, okay, we've got our infrastructure in place. Now we got to plug it in to Epicor or the ERP system.
So yeah, once we've done that fundamental blocking and tackling, so to speak, of establishing reliable, flexible, and secure networks and infrastructure on the shop floor, then we can start to turn our attention to, again, I'm going to say the word, I say it a lot, of use cases, of thinking about exactly how work flows on the shop floor, again, from initial PO receipt through all the inventory and quality and production management processes, maybe subcontractor shipments in there for many of you. But at the end of the day, getting that product either staged into finished goods inventory or prepared for shipment. Again, there's a lot of distinct steps in there, and they do vary by customer, but turning our focus to that, and again, really breaking it down. Again, my advice is, if you don't know where to start at the beginning. And again, everybody buys materials and receives them. And that may be the first point at which you want to start gaining better control and visibility of inbound materials. That also is a point at which you may start to apply internal labeling. In other words, when I say this, I'm not talking about labels that are required by our customers or end users, but using labeling, whether that's human readable or machine readable, i.e. barcodes, at that point at which materials first enter our building, and then being able to use that label in conjunction with the software to accurately and timely record the movement and transactions that happen. So again, my advice here is to focus on workflow. And go ahead.
So there's a couple of quick things we can do, right? Let's talk about this real quick, right? Is upgrade to the latest release. Why do we want to do that? I know why we want to do that, but I thought you would be more eloquent at that.
There's a couple of reasons. Each successive release of the ERP does include significant advancements and features and functionality that can benefit us. And again, the upcoming release, which, I don't know about all of you, but I'm anxiously anticipating, 2025.2, includes some enhanced functionality around PCIDs. specifically PCIDs, and I'll define what that is in a minute, used within the production workflow, especially as it relates to a lot of serially tracked items, which might apply to many of your businesses. But in short, each new release contains important business functionality that we can use to enhance and extend and obtain more value from our ERP investment. The second
sorry, no, go ahead, Sam.
Actually, I had one more, and as everybody here is aware, if you haven't been living under a rock in Epicor land for the last 6 or 7 years, the Kinetic UI, and specifically the complete transition away from the Windows-based smart client to the browser-based client and the Kinetic UI, that transition is 99% complete at this point in time, which really opens the door to pretty much any modern OS on a device and any modern browser being used to access the ERP. And I think that's a real game changer versus 5 years ago or 10 years ago, where the choices and the technology stack to support that mobile compute within the shop floor was much more complex and much more limiting.
That's well, and it's opened up the ability to use these lower cost, lower weight tablets that we were talking about, right? And so, all right, how do we prep for this?
So there's a lot on this slide, everybody, but again, I can't emphasize strongly enough how important it is to be at the latest release. Again, as of today, that's 2025.1. We're about 3 weeks away from the GA date of 2025.2. If you're a SaaS client, this is coming to you automatically. If you're, any of the various Epicor public cloud or enterprise cloud offerings. If you're not, and you're running an older release, that's a kind of a point of entry. Before you can really take advantage of this technology and exploit it to the fullest, you need to be on the latest release. And again, it's not mentioned on this slide, but the reliability, flexibility, and security of that infrastructure is critically important. And by the way, the cheat sheet to getting there is either to be running your Epicor ERP in 2W's Epicor and Azure platform, or if you're already in Epicor's public cloud SaaS, you're already on a reliable, flexible, and secure infrastructure. But I can't mention those points often enough. The second thing that once you've addressed these fundamental blocking and tackling things that I think everyone here needs to turn their attention to, advanced material management, AMM, is an Epicor module. It's been around for quite a while. I think it first showed up on the scene back in the Epicor 905 days. It's gained a lot of features and functionality at every successive release since then. But understanding AMM, how it works and what it does is really fundamental, again, to those use cases. So I've coached everybody here, hey, start thinking about everything from PO receipt to customer shipment and everything that happens in between. Once you think about that, take the time to understand what AMM does and how it supports each of those processes. Link that, incoming raw material to a finished good shipping to the customer. Because again, your homework is to start understanding what it does, because it's going to be critically important once we turn our attention to implementing this technology. And again, this applies whether we're using a browser UI on a Windows-based tablet, whether we're using the Kinetic MES interface on a Windows-based tablet, or whether we're using Epicor Kinetic Warehouse, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, on a more compact device with integrated barcode scanning. In all those scenarios, AMM is part of the picture. Next set of bullets here, there are some choices. And again, I want to make it clear that these aren't always choices of or. So for example, Kinetic MES runs in a browser. Every shop floor transaction from a PO receipt to a customer shipment can be handled and performed in Kinetic MES. So there's use cases around that, and there are certain benefits to that. But another technology that we need to understand and may or may not have a place in your business is Epicor Kinetic Warehouse. Again, functionally does all the same things as Kinetic MES does. However, it does them in an Android native app, which does provide a better and more seamless user experience, just like when you're on your mobile phone, and you're using, your banking app versus trying to do that same transaction on the bank's website. Generally, the app works better. The same is true here. One other important differentiator between Kinetic MES in a browser and Epicor Kinetic Warehouse is because there's a piece of software running on that device, we have tighter integration to an integrated barcode scanner running on that device. So again, that becomes important as any of you who are looking at transactional entry, whether it's a PO receipt or a job material issue. There are generally multiple data points required, job number, assembly sequence, and material sequence, for example. And again, if we have to capture multiple data points and we intend to use any automated data capture technology, also known as barcoding, to do that, it's going to be smoother, easier, and faster on an EKW device than it is going to be in Kinetic MES with a, let's say, Bluetooth scanner tethered to the device.
Let's talk real quick. We're kind of running out of time here, but I do want to talk about why someone would lean into bartender. Why is that? Because if you're going to do this on the shop floor, barcoding is critical aspect of that. I mean, that's exactly what we're covering here.
Yes, and the last couple of bullets here really talk about a couple of the factors differentiating bartender as a kind of an optional but more powerful solution from SSRS, which is the native report and label generation technology built within the Epicor ERP, and they really come down to three things. If you're going to use any 2D symbologies, in other words, people think of QR codes, data matrix, two-dimensional barcode technologies that can incorporate a lot of data in a single scan, that clearly favors bartender if you're going to be generating those symbologies. Also, the volume of your label printing. If you're measuring the number of labels printed per day or per week or per shift in the hundreds or thousands, bartender's your friend. If you're only printing a small number, dozens of labels per day or per shift, then you can probably get by with SSRS. And then the last big differentiator, anybody who's tried to modify a label layout in SSRS knows what I'm talking about. Bartender is head and shoulders above SSRS Report Builder in terms of design and essentially WYSIWYG label editing from a setup point of view.
So what can we do? Like, where are the quick wins here, right? So it's pretty straightforward. It's map your processes, right? Before you're about to do this, figure out figure out the workflow. How does it work, right? Identify what are your labeling requirements. Do you need bartender for the robust flexibility, or can you get away with the standard stuff that's coming out of SSRS? And start with the easy stuff, right? Start with the standards, the standardization. Many times we see our clients and they decide to go after the really difficult one-offs as opposed to the stuff they do every day. It's the 80-20 rule, right? So spend your time dealing with the 80% of the situation as opposed to the 20% of the situation. And then Sam, from a production standpoint, run these guys what things that they can do today.
So I've bulleted out a couple of items that I think are prerequisites to really taking advantage of any shop floor data collection device and technology. The first of those is to fix your bills of operations or your routings and ensure that the routing as it's described in the ERP actually matches the physical workflow. In other words, a few minutes ago, I made the analogy, first thing we do is we take a piece of bar stock and we take it over to the saw department and we chop it into lengths. And then we take all those cut lengths and take them over to the lathe department and start turning them. If that's the workflow physically in the shop, that's the order they should appear on the router. And you wouldn't believe how many times we find, well, we put that operation there in case we ever have to do it, but we never actually do it. Well, it's going to create problems for you if you're trying to, for example, do electronic work queues instead of job travelers. If you have problems matching the bill of operations to the actual physical workflow. Second piece of advice there is, again, to work on getting Epicor scheduling right. And again, the easiest way for me to help you measure where you are against this standard is to look at the priority dispatch report. If the priority dispatch report more or less matches the order which each operation is getting done in the shop, then you're probably in pretty good shape here. If your production managers and supervisors look at the priority dispatch report and say, I don't even know what this is, you probably have some work to do. And then finally, again, I mentioned earlier that AMM is fundamental to helping you track very accurately and very finitely the movement of material through the shop. The thing that's part of AMM and that a lot of people get kind of wrapped around the axle on is the concept of input and output bin and warehouse at the resource level. But again, if you think about the workflow, these absolutely make sense. Again, back to our saw and lathe example. When we're done cutting pieces of bar stock at the saw shop, those have to move over to the lathe and to a particular lathe, whatever lathe is scheduled to do that next operation. And so understanding that relationship of input and output, warehouse and bin, is what helps us use AMM to direct those material movements.
So let's put a bow on this. Just to wrap it all up, right? Make your infrastructure reliable. Do that. Make sure that your Wi-Fi has the appropriate coverage. Play around, pilot the mobile devices. Your shop floor workers are mobile. You shouldn't force them to stand in line to wait to use the 1 or 2 PCs that sits on the shop floor, right? And then security. Implement multi-factor authentication. I mean, we say that all the time. If I had a nickel for every webinar we talked about multi-factor authentication, I'd have a lot of nickels. And it's very, very important, and it's very, very important for your shop floor shop floor workers as well. And then our overall mantra is start small. Don't eat the elephant. Find the affordable wins, right? Spend the $5,000 on the Wi-Fi survey, and then spend a few $100 buying new access points or something, right? In order to get you that that can have a huge impact on the productivity of your shop floor. Just that small little piece, right? And then as you start to scale your operations, go out and spend $100 on a low-cost tablet and $60 per month on a cloud Windows 365, and work with that. Buy a couple, see how they work, right? So let's implement Hello for Business, which uses your your biometric information in order to log in. These are very small projects that you can implement, you can win, and then you can slowly start to scale that out. Guys, I'm going to talk a little bit about what's coming next, the rest of the series. You got anything you want to add here?
Actually, this whole series, and you're going to talk about this, Mark, but this whole series, is really about creating the modern shop floor, right? We know that not all shop floors look like this today. This isn't your should already be here. We're really talking about how to, what's the next thing? We talked about spacely sprockets while we were putting together this series, right? And maybe we'll get further into that as we go. But what does a modern shop floor look like? And that's really where we're headed. So, Mark, as you create what's next.
Yeah, so the next session we're going to have in a few weeks, we're going to talk about streamlining the operations. We're going to get more into some of the stuff that Sam was talking about with automation and with your ERP system. Then we're going to talk about how to get, the next session, we're going to talk about real-time insights, how to get information off the shop floor into the hands of the decision makers of your business. And then, of course, we're going to show you how we can make you more competitive, more effective, and more efficient through modernizing your shop floor. So that's what's coming up. I think we're going to do these over the next few months. Session 4 probably coming in right around mid-December. So something to look for. We'll have the recordings on the YouTube channel if you miss one. So if you miss one, you won't be left out. Don't think that you can't, skip ahead. That's what we got. Sue, we got any questions?
We do. So before I jump into the and review ones that we didn't show, Tom, you published a couple so you could respond to one. So the first one I wasn't sure if you addressed yet. So our factory staff hate the triple login device, Kinetic MES. How to simplify that?
Yeah, and that's, we single sign-on is a thing, using something like Hello for Business where that handles your device sign-on. So now it's Sam has signed into this device that gets handed off to Kinetic automatically. So he's then logged into Kinetic without any additional actions on his part. And then at the MES level, his employee ID or depending on what you're doing exactly, but gets handed off, linked and handed off as well, to where really it's he might be walking up and just tapping his RFID badge or swiping his fingerprint to get all the way logged into the both Kinetic as well as MES. There's other ways, but that's our preference is the Entra ID, the Microsoft stack with single sign-on.
Did you want to elaborate any more on your answer to Matt, or are you good there?
Yeah, just Matt had asked about handhelds. The Honeywells are too small, the screens are tiny, surfaces are too big, a little bit cumbersome, expensive. What's a good one? The Zebra ET40, ET45 is something that everybody's raving about right now. The 8 to 10 inches, under a pound, rugged. You can wear heavy gloves and still operate them. Really great devices. There's others out there. Panasonic's got a tough book. It's a little bit pricey. There's some others that are there, or you go the super lightweight, inexpensive route. We've deployed Fire tablets for people, and they're like $65 a piece. They've got a modern browser. You can do them. You might have to, I don't want to say jailbreak, that's not the right term, but you might have to get to where you can get outside of the Amazon ecosystem on them. But so you've got options. But those Zebras are really popular right now, and they're pretty inexpensive.
Okay, a couple more questions. We got Sam. This one probably is maybe coming your way. So is Epicor Kinetic too complex for a manufacturer with a small IT team? How does the infrastructure help?
Well, certainly reliable, secure, and flexible, as we advocated for. If you check those boxes and you maintain that, and again, for organizations that don't have those capabilities in-house, 2W is purpose-built to help you achieve those things. We know how to do all those things at that fundamental infrastructure level. Once you have that, again, the way we approach any implementation, you're an expert in your business. We're experts in the technology that can support and enhance that business. And we view that as a partnership. Again, you know what you know, we know what we know, and together we can solve some really big problems in really effective ways.
I think too, just to add on to that, I think the other piece is if you have a small IT group, the best motion is to minimize your IT footprint, right? Get off-prem as much as you possibly can. Get your email into the cloud if you're not in 365. Move your servers into Azure, SolidWorks, or whatever your CAD system is. Get rid of the on-prem servers and the hardware, because that's the stuff that continues to break. And if we can move all of that stuff into Epicor SaaS or Epicor in Azure, or move the rest of your stuff into that environment, use cloud PCs. We've talked this a couple of times, Windows 365 and the link devices. That's a really great option. And when you do that, when we see our clients doing that and removing their on-prem footprint, now you have your IT group worried about productivity, utilizing the software. How do I get Epicor to function better for the way that my business works, as opposed to messing with mouses and keyboards and connectivity and that kind of stuff.
Great, thanks. So I know, so we have a question coming in about upcoming sessions. So I know we're still developing that content, but maybe one of you could speak to this a little bit. So the question is one of the upcoming sessions going to address operator performance and utilization?
So
it will now.
Well, we actually appreciate the feedback, and I think that's reinforcing again. So I mentioned timeliness and accuracy of transactional data capture, in more or fewer words a little while ago. Again, the lower barriers we can have, both physical and technological, to data capture at the moment those things are occurring, the better the quality of that data can be, right? Down to and including, one of the topics that we're going to discuss is, I mentioned a couple of pieces of software, both, the standard Kinetic MES screens along with Epicor Kinetic Warehouse. There's also, and we're going to talk about it in a future session a little bit, Epicor Advanced MES, and also the latest entrant to this space, Epicor Connected Process Control. But in any case, putting the technology and the point of data capture at the point of use is the key to that, right? Because if we're writing something on a piece of paper and data entering in the office 24 hours later, we've lost a lot of time and a lot of accuracy and a lot of granularity in that data. Whereas if, maybe we're capturing each part movement as it comes off the lathe and moves over to the mill, much more granular data, much more data, and much more measurement that we have available for analysis.
Great, thanks. Okay, next question. How can a smaller manufacturer justify the cost of upgrading Wi-Fi or mobile devices for the shop floor?
It goes back to that quick ROI, right? If you put, $15,000 or $20,000, let's say, into a robust Wi-Fi and tablets throughout the shop, the immediate reduction in production delays and in reporting that comes from that, getting that feedback back into the office, we're going to talk about in the coming weeks, quickly about what the status is, getting feedback to all the way out to customers, potentially even, or up to purchasing if there's something that's stalled, for instance, or to production management if there's something stalled, as well as those changes, getting change orders out to the floor, getting electronic travelers. I know Sam's going to talk about, I think, next week or next session. Getting those types of things quickly out to the floor and in multiple hands or in the right hands right away, you're going to see that $15,000, $20,000, $25,000 investment get paid off in no time, even for a very small shop. This is the type of thing that scales really quickly, and you can start small. Again, get the Wi-Fi done, and then pilot a single device or two. You'll see the savings kick in fast.
Yeah, I think one of the things about a Wi-Fi survey is, in a lot of times what we see is it's not, you don't have to buy all new access points. It's just a moving
Tweak,
it's a tweak. It's move this thing 3 feet over here, or put this other one over here, and maybe you do have to add one. I mean, and access points aren't very expensive, but I think the key to that is to start small. I will say though that we did have a client that went through a Wi-Fi survey, and they realized that the biggest problem were the microwaves in their break room, and they had to replace their microwaves. I don't know how much that cost, but it enabled all the Wi-Fi in administration would die at lunchtime because everybody was using these microwaves. So, but those are the things that you found, right?
Yeah.
We have just one last question. I know we're running short on time here. How do we modernize legacy systems without starting over?
That's a great question. So first of all, you don't need a complete overhaul, right? This is about integrating with existing systems, and building, again, I know we keep saying the start small, right? But adding Wi-Fi and tablets, getting to existing data in real time without replacing other machines. Adding mobile scanners to what you're doing is a big deal. More and more, especially with cloud options and SaaS options, you're no longer having to replace those on-prem servers every time you're doing an Epicor upgrade. Let us handle it if you're doing it in Azure with us, or let Epicor handle it if you're doing it Epicor SaaS, right? Or whoever your ERP is. So you can kind of bridge those. The other is, and we're not really going to get into it in this series, but we've talked about it before, and we'd be happy to talk further and directly about it. Modern data warehouse type capabilities are huge for this. Start to pull the data from your legacy systems along with your newer systems into something that you can do, reporting on all of the visibility that you need for production and action and automation. That lets you preserve a lot of that existing legacy without replacing it yet, but continue to move forward at the same time. And Microsoft Fabric, of course, is where we go for that as a Microsoft partner. But there's lots of options for how you go down those roads, and really get a lot of benefit from your existing legacy while you continue to move forward and build out this modern workplace.
Thank you, guys. That's all the time we have for today. Thank you, all three of you today, for that presentation. It was great. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and we will see you next time.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.